Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with you on this 3rd of September. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that easily by calling us at the 1-800-472-0391 number there on your screen. That's the Alaska Weather Information Line. As always, you can find us online at weather.gov/Alaska, or if you want to jump right to your area of Alaska, just substitute in Alaska with Anchorage, Fairbanks, or Juneau, and you'll get South Central, Southwest, Southeast, or the interior, and the North Slope and the West Coast from those websites there. One click off this website will get you there as well. If you ever need to find anything that you can't find on the website, need additional information, or you're just curious about some weather event that you witnessed, we'd love to see pictures as always. But you can always email me here at david.snider@noaa.gov. It's my pleasure to serve you any way I possibly can. As we look at fire danger here, the season is certainly waning very quickly, but we are still dealing with dry conditions across the Copper River Basin. Many areas in South Central, Kodiak, Southwest, certainly northern parts of Southeast, and the interior weeks ago, we're looking at some very beneficial rains. Now, South Central and the Anchorage area, conditions have improved. The fire danger is still with us, but conditions have certainly improved substantially just in the last week or so. But we are still seeing very tinderbox dry conditions around the region, but the added humidity, cloud cover, cooler temperatures, and at least a little bit of rain, in some cases more than that, around the Kenai Peninsula, anywhere from a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch in some cases, has certainly helped. Copper River Basin hasn't seen that. So we're still dealing with very, at least high fire danger, but at least we're not up into the extreme category. So a little bit of a bright spot there, I suppose. As we look at the satellite imagery over the last 12 hours or so, you can see low pressure turning out here just to the east now of St. Matthew Island and north of St. Paul. That's drawing in a healthy southerly flow across southwest. That will keep things fairly upset and unstable here across the west coast for the next several days, probably finishing out the week. A low pressure system here across the Bering Sea will continue to be fairly slow moving in its trajectory. It doesn't look like it's going to move all the way across the state at all. In fact, the upper level weather pattern should probably lock it in place here across the eastern Bering for the foreseeable future. A low pressure here across the Pacific Northwest combined with several other lows are all underneath a broad area of low pressure in the upper atmosphere. As you look at it here with a visual satellite picture, you can see not a whole lot of cloud cover over parts of South Central and certainly hit and miss across the Bering. We've had ample sunshine across the North Slope today. Temperatures there from Prudhoe Bay, AKwx, I believe, or Nuiqsut, I should say, and Deadhorse. All those readings made it into the mid to upper 60s today. So probably record-setting heat. Watch for more information about that from our friends there at the forecast office there in Fairbanks. But certainly a very warm day on the North Slope in most communities, and certainly those communities I just mentioned. As you look at the weather map today, low pressure is sitting just outside of Prince William Sound at 1,011 millibars, and we've got another weaker low here just to the west at 990 millibars. This is an area of probably low-end gales in some cases, as that's moving across the Pribilofs, that healthy west and southwesterly flow, keeping a lot of wet weather across the west coast. Not a whole lot of rain reporting at each individual stations there, but certainly some waves of showers passing through. Another surge of warmer and wetter air is already making its way into the western chain. A little bit of a ridge building here, so some stable air just north of the chain there. That'll be interrupted by the next wave moving to the north and east. Out across southeastern Alaska, a front working its way across the central and eastern archipelago is creating some light rain across southern parts of southeast. Behind that, drying and clearing with high pressure trying to build in briefly, it looks like. But overall, not a horribly wet day across a large part of Alaska, but certainly an unsettled day with low pressures lurking out there in the Bering. What you can see again is that broad area of clearing taking place there across the North Slope. Underneath that is where we're finding those very warm temperatures and likely record-setting temperatures across the central Beaufort Seacoast this afternoon. For tonight, low pressure will creep its way into western parts of Norton Sound at 992 millibars. Areas of light rain and fog should be expected with that. And when we get to the aviation forecast here in just a few minutes, you'll notice this will accompany the IFR and broad areas of MVFR across the west coast for the rest of the week. Low pressure is sitting across the western chain and dragging in 2 areas of low pressure. One of those, of course, the whole thing is along the front, but one of those out in front at 999 millibars is helping to pull in that southwesterly flow into the central and eastern chain. High pressure still sitting over the Gulf, mainly low clouds north of that, some breaks as you head up into the Cook Inlet region. Southeast, you're looking at some areas of light rainfall, mainly along the coast, perhaps up toward Gustavus and west of Juneau. But with high pressure in command and relatively quiet weather today, plan for fog across some parts of the region tonight. Showers will continue across the eastern interior up and down the Alcan border with fog and some light rainfall across the north slope. As we get into your Wednesday, high pressure sets up very close to Cook Inlet, maybe just to the west over the Susitna Valley. That could be enough to help draw in more southwesterly flow into southwest Alaska and the west coast, and that'll keep showers fairly predominant for most of the weather during the day. IFR and MVFR concerns will prevail there as well. Showers linger across a trough for the Alcan, generally from about Old Crow, just north of Arctic Village and right over Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. Won't see a whole lot of shower activity across southeast, but you can expect more clouds. Showers generally outside of Cross Sound from Sitka up to just south of Yakutat. And a look out west shows low pressure working into the southern Bering, 1,002 millibars there. That front creeping north and east into the eastern parts of the Aleutians. They're passing over Nikolsky perhaps tomorrow afternoon and heading for Dutch Harbor in Alaska. With the southwest flow again and high pressure in place, that should keep that warm and wet air moving in from the south off the North Pacific and right into western parts of Alaska. For Thursday, well, it looks like we'll break up the clouds a little bit more across the central and northern parts of the Panhandle, perhaps into the Copper River Valley. Maybe a few showers sneaking over the eastern Alaska range, but it looks like a large part of Prince William Sound and the Kenai Peninsula will at least get a partly sunny sky for Thursday. Out to the west, not the case at all. Low pressure sitting in the southern Bering, 1,002 millibars there. A broad southerly flow continues to work its way up the west coast. Areas of light rain, fog, and drizzle should be expected across the western Brooks Range too. Low pressure over the Chukchi, 1,006 millibars there, also bringing in a weak trough. You can see it kind of forming right about here across the north slope. And again, all of that bringing in that warm and wet air. Many areas across the west coast will be dealing with that. Probably looking at above average temperatures there due to this pattern as well through the end of the week. Let's take a look at temperatures tonight then for southeast. Upper 40s and lower 50s for many locations there. Upper 40s to about 50 degrees for most in south central and the Copper River Valley. Might see a few places sneak their way into the 30s, outlying areas outside of Healy, Tanana. Probably going to see some cool weather there for sure, not to be missed for this time of the year. Mid 40s around Fairbanks though. 30s and 40s for the North Slope, still very mild for Utqiagvik out toward Wainwright and Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse as you head down the west coast. Temps there in the upper 40s around Norton Sound, Unalakleet, Nome, St. Lawrence Island, 51 around Macquarie. And it looks like 47 around St. Paul with temps in the lower 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, Sandpoint, and 53 around Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. High temperatures for your Wednesday, fairly mild in southeast. Look at those temps still in the 60s there. Lower 60s for Prince William Sound, about 63 for Kenai, about the same for Anchorage. Fairbanks, you're looking at about 64. Fort Yukon, 63 degrees. Tanana, and as well as many north toward Ambler and Bettle, still looking at 50s and 60s there. Another mild day on the north slope. Utqiagvik, Wainwright, Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, Kaktovik, all in the 40s, if not mid-50s. Looks like Bethel, you're looking at 57 degrees. Unalakleet, 56. Galena, 59. King Salmon, Dillingham, and most of Bristol Bay hovering very close to 60 degrees. Overnight lows Thursday morning, a little bit cooler in the interior. Upper 30s and lower 40s for many locations there. Southeast still holding in the upper 40s and low 50s. Most of the west coast and southwest still talking about temperatures in the upper 40s to about 50 degrees near Bethel. 49 in St. Paul as well as around St. Lawrence Island. Kotzebue about 50 degrees. And Kivalina is a few degrees cooler. Looks like Point Hope and Point Lay will be in the 40s as well. Highs on Thursday, lower to mid 60s for southeast, low 60s for south central. The interior, mid 60s. Fort Yukon west. Closer to 60 degrees. The Brooks Range, including Arctic Village, in the 50s. North Slope communities in the low to mid 50s, but still warm there. Kotzebue Sound temperatures mid to upper 50s for you. Norton Sound 57 or so around Unalakleet, and Bristol Bay temps in the upper 50s and low 60s. Let's take it 2 weeks out as we go into your climate future here. 8 to 14 day predictions show a trend toward above normal conditions continuing. This is the period ending September 17th now. That warmth is possible and signal is strong for many locations in the west, southwest, south central, and southeast, a little lesser so for the northeast. What about precipitation-wise as we go into mid-September? The signal is for above normal precipitation for west and southwestern Alaska into parts of southeast, a little bit drier in the north.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And onto your flying weather now. IFR will linger out across the Bering and most of the Aleutian chain. You'll see widespread IFR across southern parts of southeast, probably stretching up past Sitka and into the eastern Gulf. You'll also see a nice band of IFR stretching from the Alaska Range over the Chugach into Prince William Sound and then out over into the Gulf. Hit and miss IFR across the interior, mainly over the Yukon Flats and some of the south-facing slopes north of Ambler and Bettles. And then right across the north slope, there are many communities will be looking at least MVFR and probably IFR throughout the day. That IFR band may push just a little bit further north, lingering close to Kaktovik, but maybe just outside of Utqiagvik and Wainwright, as well as some of your further southern villages there like AKwx. Most of the Brooks Range will be looking at least MVFR, especially the west coast all the way through Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound into southwest and Bristol Bay. Kodiak will flirt with MVFR throughout the afternoon, and IFR pulls out of a large part of southeast, still lingering very close to some of the extreme southern outer coastal communities there, as well as central and western parts of the Aleutian chain. So we get into Thursday morning, you can see that westerly flow sweeping in the low ceiling and visibility into parts of southwest. Most of the southwestern capes will go down, as well as St. Lawrence Island and the western end of the Seward Peninsula. Norton Sound is going to be hit and miss with MVFR, mostly over the coastal communities, but you're going to find some breaks from time to time. The western Alaska Range entrances will be looking at IFR. Most of Cook Inlet, especially the northern end, all the way down to Kenai is also expected to be IFR in the morning. Southeast gets a little bit of a break with VFR conditions there. Most of the interior looking at VFR. Some of the northern passes will be marginal in the morning. By the afternoon, you can see IFR setting up across the west coast, Nunivak Island, Macoriac, all the way to St. Paul, St. George, and all of the Aleutians looking at IFR conditions there. East of Kodiak and generally to the north, you're looking at low ceiling and visibility. Most of southeast should be okay. Most of the Copper River Valley, as well as your eastern Alaska Range passes and into the interior should be okay, but marginal conditions will push into the Kobuk and Noatak valleys. Here's your pass conditions. And for tomorrow, Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass start out at IFR, but look for some improvement as the afternoon goes on, both going to MVFR by late in the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass also expected to be marginal for your Wednesday. Rainy Pass will get there, but after an IFR start. Windy Pass also expected to start out at instrument flight rule throughout the day. Some improvement noted there, and for Isabel Pass through the afternoon. Mentasta Pass looking at marginal conditions with some improvement, probably to VFR by the afternoon. Tanita Pass starts at IFR, a little bit of improvement as we go throughout your Wednesday. Portage Pass also looking to see some modest improvement throughout the afternoon. IFR to start for sure. And Chilkoot and White Pass at this point look to hold at marginal conditions really most of your day. As we look at freezing levels, we don't see a huge slug of cold air sitting across the region or poised and ready to move in, but you can detect a little bit of that cooler autumn air trying to sneak in around low pressure here across the north and western Bering Sea. That's dropping freezing levels at or even below 6,000 feet for most of our west coast communities. For parts of southeast, generally southern southeast especially, levels there will be between 6,000 and 8,000 feet, and you'll see levels between about 5,000 to 6,000 feet across a large part of south central Kodiak Island and the eastern interior. Icing potential remains pretty high up there, though. You may see some levels dropping to around 9,000 feet out into the central and western Bering, but for most of the mainland, concerns are going to be rather insignificant, below 10,000 feet there. It looks like most of our icing potential will be above that, and what we do see right now is at least isolated moderate if you are going to be a high flyer as we go into the mid to late week. Low pressure right now out across the west coast, sitting at about 55 to 60 knots or so across the northwest. You can see one band of the Arctic jet pushing into Bristol Bay. And then, of course, you've got the Pacific jet that's still well to our south, guiding most of the active weather just into the southern parts of southeast and the west coast of the North America. So for the meantime, really not a whole lot going on into the Gulf. The main activity is going to be along the west coast as we finish out the week. 9,000 feet, you can see that southwesterly flow moving into Bristol Bay, creating a ridge across most of mainland Alaska and keeping a strong southerly component across the Bering Strait, Kotzebue Sound into Macoriac and Nunivak Island, and that combines with a trough of low pressure out across the western parts of the Aleutians. At 3,000 feet, winds are a little bit faster here, 30 to 40 knots across the west coast, low pressure near the Bering and St. Lawrence Island, also across the western chain, and weak ridging really across most of mainland here with a little bit of an inverted trough coming in across the northeastern Pacific into parts of southeastern Alaska. Light winds across the north slope and for the most part, really across south central and the interior, 10 to 20 knots for you. Let's take a look at turbulence then. The main focus for the rest of the week will really be across the west coast. Considerable moderate across a large number of our communities from Kotzebue Sound to Norton Sound and Unalakleet all the way down toward Bethel and Kuskokwim Delta regions, as well as the central and eastern chain. All of these areas should be below 4,000 feet.
On March 11, 2011, a powerful tsunami hit Japan, destroying cities and villages. As the water receded back into the ocean, it pulled what remained of buildings, cars, boats, and homes along with it. Scrap metals, plastics, and objects of all shapes and sizes either sank near the shore or floated away. In the days that followed, large masses of floating debris could easily be seen by satellite imagery and aerial photos. In the wake of this disaster, NOAA is assessing the potential impact that the debris may have on U.S. shores. So, where will this debris go, and when will it get there? To help answer those questions, scientists are using computer models to estimate the debris' path, using its starting location in the tsunami zone and historical weather and ocean conditions. The findings are that some debris could pass near or wash ashore in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands as early as this winter. Debris may also approach the west coast of the United States in 2013 and potentially circle back to the main Hawaiian Islands in 2014. But scientists caution that there are limitations to what computer models can tell us, now that the debris has moved out of satellite view, and with currents and winds in the Pacific constantly changing, there is no guarantee that the debris will stay on the predicted path. Items will sink along the way, or break up and disperse in many directions. Despite these unknowns, NOAA and its partners are collecting data, assessing possible impacts, and making preparations in case debris does wash ashore. The 2011 tsunami in Japan reminds us that the devastation that happens on land can also become a marine debris issue at sea.
Imagine all of this underwater. In a major tsunami, it could happen. In this part of Washington state, it's happened before, hundreds of years ago. Sometime in the future, it will likely happen again. But we can be ready. If a tsunami strikes, this school will provide a place for people to ride it out above the waves.
We're in Westport, Washington, and right behind me is the very first tsunami vertical evacuation center in the United States.
This is an emergency. Please walk to the nearest exit. Go to the stair tower and proceed up the stairs.
Tsunamis are a potential hazard for low-lying coastal areas. That's why many coastal communities have plans in place to get people to safety, high ground or inland, where they can be beyond the reach of a tsunami. Often there are signs showing where to go and where to gather. Most tsunamis are caused by underwater earthquakes along subduction zones, where two of Earth's plates collide and one is forced under the other. Westport and other Pacific Northwest coastal communities are especially at risk because one of these zones lies just offshore. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone. An earthquake here caused a tsunami in 1700 that flooded shores as far away as Japan. Experts say it's just a matter of time before it happens again. Since the subduction zone is so close, a tsunami like the one in 1700 could strike before people in some low-lying areas could get to high ground or inland. And Westport doesn't have a lot of high ground or easy routes inland.
If we get an earthquake or a tsunami we're going to get a lot of water in the area really quickly, and we needed a place to go. So our community built this brand new school, and above our gym and cafeteria, we have a roof. And so the idea is that we'll get all of our students up, and anybody from the community who needs to get up, they can get up there as well.
Ocosta Elementary School might seem like a normal school, but look more closely. It's engineered to withstand monster waves. Tsunami vertical evacuation shelters must be able to resist the powerful forces that a tsunami brings. Hydrodynamic, buoyant, hydrostatic, and debris impact forces and strong currents. They're also designed to help people get to safety quickly.
There are 4 big staircases on each corner of the building, and each one of those staircases is 8 feet wide, and we can get the whole school evacuated in about 4.5 minutes.
Everybody should be at a 0.
On the roof of the building, there is water and food and buckets and shelters and tarps and blankets and different things so that we can be up there for 2, 3, maybe 4 days while we wait for rescue.
You can go to the top and you know you'll be safe. It feels really nice to have a special building because you feel protected.
This community decided that a tsunami evacuation center was important because they didn't have anywhere to go, and they decided to use their money to build the building. The additional cost is anywhere between 10 and 20% of the actual building cost itself, and that's really a sound investment for a lot of protection. You may be there a while, but you're safe and you're secure, and that's the most important thing.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your sea ice conditions. Not a whole lot of change over the last week or so. We're still looking at ice that's anywhere from 150 to about 300 nautical miles to the north and northeast of the Alaska shoreline. So no substantial change there. Let's take a look at the forecast there in southeast. As we get into your Wednesday, high pressure is in charge of the nearby area. With that, we have light winds and pretty small seas on the inside. Only 5 to 10 knot winds coming in from the south from Stevens Passage northward, northwesterlies up to 15. Really, that's the strongest amount of wind we have in the area for the Clarence Strait. 3-foot seas expected there. Light winds coming down the outer coast with winds generally about 5 to 10 knots. You're looking at about 5 to 6-foot seas in most areas, 7-foot seas outside of the Dixon entrance on Wednesday. A little bit more of a northerly push as we get into your Thursday. Light winds around 10 knots and 5-foot seas expected. Northerlies around the Lynn Canal, and then winds in Clarence Strait do exactly the opposite. They go light, 5 knots, 2-foot seas for your Thursday. For Prince William Sound, a light northeasterly flow, 10 knots, 2-foot seas, a east and south wind coming into the Kenai Fjords region, and looks like the Barren Islands about 10 to 15 knots or so from the south. Southerlies continue up Cook Inlet, and that's actually where we'll see some of our stronger winds in south central, 10 to 15 knots, looking at about 3 to 4-foot seas on Wednesday, becoming south and westerly, 10 to 15. 2 to 3-foot seas there on Thursday. A little bit of a stronger southeast flow over the western Barren Islands, south and southwesterlies in the western part of the Gulf. And light winds continue inside and outside of Prince William Sound, 10 knots and 2-foot seas there on Thursday. For Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, we're looking at winds around 10 to 25 knots. Southwesterlies inside of Bristol Bay at 15 knots there. Southerlies a little bit stronger down the Bering Sea coast. A southwesterly flow on either side of Kodiak Island will get you about 10 to 15 knots, 3 to 4-foot seas there, the strongest of which will be out in the open waters, of course. So we get into Thursday, a south and easterly flow is strengthening now in the vicinity of low pressure coming in from the west. 25 to 30 knots expected in most areas, 15 knots in Shelikof Strait. A little bit lighter winds on the eastern side of Kodiak Island, 5 to 7-foot seas on the Bering Sea coast, with 4 to 11-foot seas developing across the North Pacific waters there. So you get into Wednesday in the chain. Southerlies will be in force around the central and eastern parts of the islands, 15 to 30 knots expected with 6 to 9-foot seas South of the islands, south and easterly flow developing in the west. You're looking at about 5 to 6 foot seas there on Wednesday. Shifting a little bit to the north and to the west as we get into Thursday as this front drives eastward a little bit. You'll see it as a trough, of course, in our forecast maps, but essentially a change in that wind direction there as low pressure swings through. South and westerlies develop around Adak and Nikolsky with 6 to 7 foot seas. And then the strongest winds will be out ahead of it, 30 knots there with a 6 to 12 foot sea on either side of Unalaska, Nikolsky, and Dutch Harbor for Thursday. The west coast, south and westerlies will primarily hold on to about 25 to 30 knot winds there, 8 to 10 foot seas from St. Lawrence Island down toward Macoriac and Nunivak Island. Southeasterlies around St. Paul and St. George, 20 knots and 7 foot seas there. Southerlies inside of Norton Sound up to 30 knots with 6 foot seas coming in from the south. As we get into Thursday, winds diminish just a little bit. A south and easterly flow continues up the west coast, 20 to 25, 5 to 7 foot seas on either side of Utolan Strait and down into the Kuskokwim Delta. Southerlies around St. Matthew, St. Paul, and St. George. 4 to 6 foot seas there as you get into Thursday. Now for the north slope, southeasterlies around Kaktovik, southwesterlies for Prudhoe Bay, north of Utqiagvik, northeasterlies coming to the Chukchi coast where the winds turn offshore once again. So the winds are all over the place here on Wednesday. You're looking at about 4 to 5 foot seas outside of Kotzebue Sound. And again, southwesterlies coming into the Bering Strait region there at 30 knots. As you get into Thursday, things start to kind of line up a little bit better. We get more in line with that southerly flow across the west coast. 20 to 25 knots on Thursday with 4 to 7 foot seas, 5 foot seas around St. Lawrence Island. And for the Beaufort Seacoast, anywhere from 10 to 15 knots there. You're looking at about 2 to 3 foot seas as you go through your Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather now, high pressure's in charge of the Gulf. That's going to keep things pretty quiet across southeast and really most of south central. For the rest of the week, the big focus will be the southerly winds working up the west coast. That'll keep things very warm and very mild for the north slope, not only at night, but certainly by the daytime. Today, we saw record highs up around Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, and New Ixet as a result, I believe. And across the west, you'll see areas of low pressure lining up across the central and western chain. As we get into Wednesday, these fronts will just kind of stretch out a little bit and eventually fall apart. High pressure looks to stay in place across many parts of south central. That's going to keep the Gulf pretty quiet. That'll keep southeast pretty quiet, and that'll keep showers rolling around parts of the interior and maybe some of the mountain regions on the north and western side of south central. Copper River Valley should primarily stay mostly dry, with west and southwesterlies coming up the west coast, though. Low ceilings and low visibility at times with periods of rain and fog will continue as we wrap up the rest of the week. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.